Advaita is reality. It's translated as not to, and it's kind of seen as an exercise to constantly ask, is this a divisive thought or not? Is this perception I'm having dividing the world into two things or not? So it basically means Advaita is reality. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that state that is underneath thought. Buddha in the Diamond Sutra had a nice little saying where he said, thoughts arise from silence. So that's a really good question to ask yourself. You're lost in thoughts. Where are the thoughts coming from? Like you sit and you meditate and you can't make your thoughts stop, right? They're just going and going and going. Or you're worrying about something. You're laying in bed at night and you can't go to sleep. And your thoughts are like just going, going, going. Start noticing, where do those thoughts come from? They sound like they're very loud and they're an unpenetrable force that you can't get through. But they come from silence. And actually, they taper away into silence as well. So Advaita is simply looking for reality. And reality is behind all of our definitions of things. So we sit and we try to define things, because that's a good way to learn how to communicate with people. We have to kind of have similar definitions in order to communicate with people. But there's no way to completely 100% define a thing. Eventually, we have to just admit and believe that we're talking about the same thing. We have to believe that when I see red and say, oh, that color's red, and you see red and say, oh, that color's red, that we're seeing the same thing. It's really easy for our ego to even wonder about that. Like, is that real? Are we seeing the same colors at all? Because our minds define things so different. We have so many different associations with them. So what's really this reality that's down underneath everything? It has to be there, right? Like if you suddenly, poof, disappeared, reality's still left. If you suddenly, poof, come back in, nothing's changed except for you going and coming, right? I mean, poofing can't actually happen because matter always goes to energy and energy goes to matter, etc., etc., etc. But if that was possible, Einstein had a really strange problem he was working with at the end of his life, and he never could figure it out. What is gravity? Is it a wave or is it a field? So here's one of the questions. This is speaking of poofing, right? So here's the question that he was grappling with. The sun has a tremendous amount of gravity to it, and that's why the planets all spin around the sun. They're captured by this gravitational field. If the sun suddenly, poof, disappeared, would the planets all just boom at the same time spin away because no gravity's holding them any further? Or would they one by one start spinning away? Like, would Mercury go first and then Venus go next? And then, so is it a wave? Like, would it come as a wave through the planets? Or would the planets just boom, all start spinning away? Now, of course, this is an unanswerable question, right? Because nothing can just poof out of existence. And Einstein's the one that proved that E equals mc squared. Matter changes into energy and energy changes into matter. So the sun couldn't just poof away. But it's a nice little thought experiment. And it also goes to show how if you take reality and force it down into individual unrelated components and then try to figure out how those components work with each other, you can't really come to a final conclusion on it. All you end up is with more pieces and more pieces and more pieces, smaller and smaller pieces, or maybe bigger and bigger pieces. And one thing that Advaita and enlightenment, and actually native teachings and Aboriginal teachings tell us, is that the big problem in Western science is that they try to remove the observer from the thing that's being observed. And so right there, the entire discipline of science is based on duality, on separation. That the very idea that you can remove the observer from what's being observed. And this is very easily shown in one quantum physics experiment that's very, very often misframed, where you're looking at a tiny, tiny, tiny particle. Is it a wave or is it a particle? And it, New Agey thought likes to believe that this experiment proves that human consciousness can look at things and change things. And that's not what it proves at all, because what really happens in the experiment is it depends on which device you're using to look at this thing. If you're using a device that measures waves, it looks like a wave. If you're using a device that measures and looks at particles, it looks like particles. So the actual teeny tiny quantum thing doesn't change. It's the way it's being looked at that changes. And so it doesn't prove that the human being can change reality with our minds. What it proves is that we are already an intricate part of everything we're looking at. And how we look at it helps determine our conclusions from it. So what Advaita is saying is not two. It's saying that our conclusions aren't 100% real. Our observation is definitely not real if we're seeing it as a separate being. That there is an interconnectedness that's deeper down inside of everything. And if we learn to work from this state of interconnectedness rather than the state of separation, we can start living on the earth as human beings again. I mean, isn't that really what the final conclusion of any spiritual search should be? How to live here on our earthly reality without this separation that's causing so many problems. How do we really come together and start making our life a life of no separation? How do we live in reality